Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Kendra, Hannah, and the rest of the beautiful team for having me. It is truly a privilege and honor. My name is Leah, and I'm one of the two outreach and counseling support workers with Sandgate Women's Shelter of York Region. Our three main areas of work that we focus on as outreach is to provide one-on-one counseling, women's support groups, and public education and awareness. And we support women accessing our shelter program as well as within the community. So for the moment, I'm going to be talking about Lucy Hicks Anderson. So in 1945, a Black trans woman named Lucy Hicks Anderson was arrested and convicted of perjury. The government accused her of lying about her sex and her marriage license. In the face of virulent racism and transphobia during the trial, Anderson had the conviction to argue, "I defy any doctor in the world to prove that I am not a woman. And I have lived, dressed, acted just what I am, a woman." When asked if she wore a wig, she responded, "If I think I look better with a wig, I do." Prosecutors kept asking if she had male sex organs, and Anderson refused to answer. After Anderson was arrested, she was forbidden from wearing women's clothes in a men's prison. This has been our Pride Moment, just brought to you by Sandgate Women's Shelter of York Region, and our website is www.sandgate.ca.
Hi, my name is Hannah Mullings Tatum, and I'm the creator and facilitator of A Community Within Our Communities. A Community Within Our Communities at its core is a safe space for LGBTQ+ people and allies alike. We openly discuss some of the most difficult topics surrounding our community in a respectful, loving, and compassionate manner. It is a place to educate and be educated. The goal is to encourage not just open dialogue and acceptance, but to celebrate our differences and our excellence. Thank you. And we'd like to take this time to acknowledge the land that we are on. We acknowledge that Georgina is located on stolen lands belonging to the Chippewas of Georgina Island. We respectfully recognize the countless contributions of Indigenous peoples to Canada and the world. We also would like to acknowledge that Black people, Africans, were hunted, captured, and stolen from our homelands. We respectfully recognize the countless contributions of Black people, Africans, to Canada and the world. I'll take a moment just to take that in. And with that, I would like to introduce you all to our lovely, intelligent, passionate, strong, and as my mother said last week, fly AF moderator for this week, Victoria Ennis.
Thanks, Hannah. I'm really excited to be back and grateful to be back moderating. As you know, the viewers will find it just as cherishing as I did last week. And because the title is Bridging the Gap, the landscapes are different and the realities can be different amongst younger and older LGBTQ people. And I wanted to start by asking Henrique, what are some things that you believe the older generation may be challenged by or may not grasp from your perspective?
I think that is something that is not only about the older generation, but also about the younger generation, is the need of understanding, especially because I think that there are certain part of history, and we are constantly creating history, and that is not being acknowledged or listened in the moment. So, you know, I think that the most recent example that I can think of is the use of pronouns, that I see that there are people who are still very much struggling or resisting to the change of like, wait, but why do we need to do that? Like, why don't we have only those two pronouns that we always had before? And I'm like, well, but I think that it's just something that everybody wants to be more comfortable with and being accepted. And instead of just, okay, let's learn and let's move on, it's just there's this enormous resistance with that I think that is just a matter of listening and being open for a change. Just like I think they were open to change in their time period too.
Thanks, Enrique. And that's also interesting because I think before there was a huge emphasis on people being allowed to exist in a different side of the binary than what they were presented with before. And now people are breaking out of binaries and they're saying binaries are not as important to them, right? And so that conversation about pronouns is also really a part of the conversation as well. And I wanted to ask Rosalind, what parts of history do you think that young people may have forgotten? Responding to Henrique.
Okay, well, history, I mean, let's just look at where it all started. You know, people all focus around the Stonewall riot in, the Stonewall Inn, and what happened there. Most people you know, have no idea that this all began from the greater trans community and more specifically from the Black trans community. But also years before that would have been the Compton riot that also happened that even more people know less about. So people aren't really focusing so much about where everything began and how everybody kind of got to where, you know, there's these active pride events and stuff happening. So that's just a tiny, I think it's a little tiny bit that I think it's always important to remember our history, which, you know, this began talking about some history, some past history, which I think is also important.
Absolutely. And it's true that I see a lot on social media that people do focus on the Stonewall. And I don't think that people do know about Compton riots before. And that is something that people may not know about LGBTQ history, right? And I think I want to move to Jeannie and I want to ask, what are some issues you face that maybe the other generations may not have thought about?
Awesome. Okay, thank you. So in my case, I'm a sandwich generation, and I'm going to define that because there's always been sandwich generations, but I am going to define that in terms of post-Stonewall, meaning that in that one event, as Raza said, many earlier things were already happening, starting with the push for justice and equality and just the right to be alive. But Stonewall was timed in a larger civil rights movement, social justice movement. So for us in the queer community, it tends to be that piece, that nugget that kind of changed things. So anyways, so I have lived with a generation of people who have been out, the first generation of people who have been out for most of their adult lives. And I have a younger generation who are coming out earlier and younger because of some of the human rights strides that have been made here in Canada anyways regarding the LGBTQ plus populations. It affords queer people of my generation to have the benefit of those who came before, who broke the ground in terms of civil rights, social justice, and put what was then called gay rights on the map. And at the same time, lesbian women this whole time were mobilizing as part of a feminist movement, and were giving language and context to heavily gendered issues that crossed over into the trans community, into the lesbian community, into the bisexual community. So I'm also able to recognize that our youth are still facing enormous struggles, because we don't live in the world where it's perfectly okay to be who we are. We haven't reached some kind of magical rainbow nirvana where it's just all good now. So I feel in that sandwich place, I feel protective as our seniors and our elders are aging into a place where care is needed. And I feel protective as a mother, as a queer femme, when I see our youth still struggling to find their place in a world that, you know, everybody loves June. It's all happy pride. It's all sort of Skittles and rainbows, and it's a wonderful party. But our youth are still coming out and having to come into their own in a hostile environment. So I'm really conscious of that. And I think that needs to be honored because we're not there yet.
Wow, thank you, Jeannie. That was a great history. And the sandwich generation is also interesting, something that I didn't think about even myself, that you kind of fit into some different places, not just identifying with one side. Vanessa, I wanted to ask if you have similar sentiments as Jeannie in this sandwich generation.
I guess, Jeannie did a really great job of starting us off. And I know that there's things that I would like to say that I don't know if this generation, and I can't believe I'm a middle-aged person saying this, things that may not be considered. But I remember having to, when I came out, and we talked about this last time, coming out of the closet, what that looks like. And I think I want to go back to that because coming out as a teacher in my early 20s, I don't want to say it's different or easier or anything, but I want to let everyone know that it was one of the greatest challenges ever in my 20s to do that. And I don't know what it's like for newer teachers. I don't want to speak for all of them, but I do actually work amongst LGBTQ younger generation teachers. So, there have been strides made, thank goodness, in some ways. The other pieces too, I remember having to fill out for my partner a beneficiary form. And putting down, there was just male and female. There were no other, other whoever you are, that's it. You're just male or female. And the other piece was, even having to put down that I needed same-sex beneficiary pieces was a big deal. It was a lot to take in. So I don't know what that means to everybody here, but it meant a lot for me at that moment as a young 20-year-old. I think I said this with the youth, I'm a little jealous, like you get to wear what you want. And I don't know how to say that with sounding, not humble, but it was just that there were all these boxes that we fit in. And there was no fluidity, absolutely none. And I say it again, I do not wear docks and I do not wear cargo pants. And yes, I play sports as a lesbian. So I'll leave it there, Victoria.
Thanks, Vanessa. And I think what you said about even having those binaries when you're filling out a form, right? You can't say, this is my partner, this is my wife. They're saying, who's your husband? Where's the male, female? And that binary really hurts, even though people in your life have accepted you, people in your school, you try and go one step outside and then you realize, oh, we're still here, right? And I wanted to ask Hannah, do you feel like this is also the case for the younger generation? Do you find these types of boundaries in your life as well?
Well, when I was thinking about this question, I was trying to think about things that I thought that maybe generations that came before me wouldn't have had to face. And it was actually kind of hard for me to come up with things because I was thinking, well, I don't have to fight to be allowed to be alive. So I think that there's a lot of privilege in that. And I want to recognize that because I think that's really important. So I tried to come up with things that were that I at least hadn't seen very many people who were older than me talking about, at least. And I think Henrique was mentioning before about non-binary pronouns and how that's a big thing for people to talk about now, and it is important to use more inclusive language. But then the other thing that really sticks out to me and is really important to me is, and Jeannie kind of just touched on it with pride and all these like huge corporations that suddenly now want to capitalize on it and make it, and like they want our money, but they're gonna take the money that we give them and then go donate to anti-gay like campaigns or companies or whatever it is. And I think that's something that I at least don't see a lot of older people talking about, even if they maybe have thought about it. But I think that it's just, it's troubling what these companies do, because they want to, I think the term is rainbow washing everything. And they want to stick a rainbow on everything, but they don't actually care about our rights or our freedoms. And it's performative activism at its prime, really. And yeah, I think that was a big one for me.
Thanks, Hannah. And that's interesting as well because we're kind of noticing this theme of maybe the younger generation has more of a connection to the larger Pride celebrations. And if the older generation is moving away from that, then maybe if I'm hearing you correctly, maybe there's more of a burden on younger generations for what Pride means right now, and having that be on you to say, okay, these corporations are taking over, but it feels more like something that might be an issue you think about more than the older generation thinks about. If you wanted to respond, Hannah, you
Oh,
can.
yeah, sorry. Sorry, it's just my computer's skipping a little bit, so I'm picking up just little issues, little snippets of conversation. I think that when I was thinking about the way I was going to say this is that I think I see it more with people who are older than me but aren't necessarily senior people. I see kind of like that middle group. I see not paying as much attention as they should to what these corporations are doing. And I think when I don't want to be stereotypical, but I think like the first company that comes to mind is always BuzzFeed and their level of sometimes performative activism. I think it's like that section that they're older than me, but like it's that area that I think doesn't think about this enough, and they're just kind of want to buy the pride flags from Walmart when it's like, well, Walmart like backed up Trump or something like that. Like it's not, it's that's sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Hannah. That was a great expansion. And it's true that people do, as we're having this panel, have differing views based on their own life experiences, right? And there are certain things that you see as important to your own lived experience being an LGBTQ plus group as someone else's is also different. And I wanted to talk about queer and LGBTQ culture. I wanted to ask Leo, where does our slang come from? What parts of the culture may be dated and deserving of criticism? And what parts of it do you enjoy?
Hi, can everyone hear me? Okay, fantastic, thank you. So I love queer culture. I've been in it since I was like single digits. I know, veteran, but yeah, it's been so interesting being the age I am. I'm 21, so I kind of saw the evolution of queer culture as it has evolved through its time on the internet, and the way it's kind of risen above the deluge of self-deprecation that characterizes the internet and the way it delivers its messages. It's so interesting, and it's so heartwarming to see it be characterized by positivity. That being said, I think, controversial opinion, but I think we have gotten to a point where the positivity is maybe a bit of a detriment. I really cannot understate the value of how the community has evolved onto the internet, that it's so important that it has found pretty much its home on a platform that can spread information almost instantly. And yet I am so frustrated so much of the time to not see that be capitalized on. We spend so much time as a community saying we're valid, trans men are valid, trans women are valid, bisexual people are valid. And yes, that is true. And there needs to be a place for that. But at the same time, we need to spend more time than we currently are using the platform to educate and have intellectual discussions. I have needed validation, and it should never be understated the value of going on Instagram and seeing a post that says you are valid and taking that as fact. I have felt what the benefits of having those posts out there do. But we can't pretend like education is going to happen voluntarily. Unfortunately, if a lot of people here, like, we're all minorities, we understand that unfortunately it's kind of up to us to take the initiative to educate people. And if the entire space and the entire community is saturated with just, we are valid and that's the end of the conversation, I don't know that we're going to get very much farther than we currently are. I don't know why I have never met a trans person, never met more than one trans person who has the same definition of gender expression. I don't know why I am 21 and I've never gotten a clear answer on what the difference between bisexuality and pansexuality is. These are very, very simple concepts that I probably should have run across by now. And yes, there is definitely, it should not be anyone's responsibility to educate me, but I think it's deeply fallacious to think that just anyone is going to go on Google Scholar and like look up papers and studies and like intellectual writings on these things. I love the positivity. We need the positivity. Never get rid of the positivity, but maybe if we could just slip in like a side of actual debate and education, I think that's really what we're missing right now. And to answer the slang question, everything comes from Black drag queens. No, I will not be taking questions at this time.
Thanks, Leo. And what you said was interesting because we do see that a lot in social media where you have queer people are valid, end of discussion, right? Black Lives Matter, I don't want to talk anymore about it, right? And so it's interesting that, yes, there's a huge amount of information on social media, but at the same time, maybe there's not enough. And where do we start, right? Your question is the same questions that I have, but where do we start? I have seen posts where people compare and say, this is the difference between bisexuality and pansexuality. Am I still confused sometimes? Yes, right? That's the reality of the situation. But at the same time, if people are identifying in a certain way, then we can also say that's valid. If the definitions overlap, then people can still identify either which way, right? But where do we start is the question. And Grant, I wanted to ask you, kind of mirroring just the same question, what parts of our culture are dated, deserving of criticism? What parts do you enjoy?
Well, I'm telling you, after that, I don't know what to say. And I quite deliberately put a great deal of thought into my responses to the 3 easy questions I chose. And so Leo, I'm so gonna take this away from where you went. Bless your heart. For me, I thought about language, language and the slang. And I think really what we're talking about now, certainly, this is where the times they are changing. These are very, very different times that comes into play. And if you look back at the slang in the 50s, which I did, and I did an enormous amount of research on the slang, and oftentimes the language we used was language that we needed to protect ourselves and our community. The language that the community was speaking appeared to be very, very innocent to those outside the community, and had a very different meaning. For instance, when I was coming out, I heard people refer to friends of Dorothy. Okay, so a gay person would know Friends of Dorothy because that's Judy Garland, who had a huge gay following. So there wasn't a great deal of discussion required, especially publicly. So, to move it to another place, we know that words can hurt. We know that owning those words sometimes makes it easier. For me personally, I am really offended by the word queer. I don't care to be referred to as queer any more than I really appreciate being referred to in a derogatory way being called faggot. And I had to go online because I love to bring clarity to the word. We know that this is a bundle of sticks or twigs bound together as fuel. So I'm not making the connection, quite frankly. So, you know, for me, really, this piece was just about the language, what it truly means, the way we are able to speak more openly about ourselves, define ourselves as it works for us. You know, are there parts of the culture that deserves criticism? Gay culture has and will continue to shift and change as it needs to. I choose what works for me and celebrate that. But quite frankly, I've had enough skeletons in my closet. I really don't think that I'm in any position to be critical. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Grant. And it's interesting also because when you say that you have certain words that you would feel offended by, but then there's also certain words that you say that other people would be offended by, maybe it also raises and begs the question, who can reclaim words and who can't, right?
Yes.
And so it's interesting, right? Because as a younger generation, I think the word queer has been extremely reclaimed. It's part
Yes.
of the LGBTQ, right? Yes. Whereas I wouldn't say that I don't necessarily see in the near future F being part of this as something that people feel is going to be part of the acronym, right? And so it's interesting because maybe people of a different generation, that was something that was used against you and you've reclaimed. And then I don't know about what's happening with that with future generations, but it is an interesting conversation of reclaiming language.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk intersectionality. What is it? If you're intersectional, in what ways and how does it affect you? I want to start with Vanessa because last time you mentioned that you are in the margins of the margins. And so let's talk about intersectionality.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. And good memory. So, you know, it's the margins of the margins means that sometimes it's who do I identify myself as? Like there's these checklists that now you have to check off to be an equity, different equity pieces, right? And equity is a nice cliche word that we have out here now. So what does it mean? Like, am I a Black woman? Am I a Black lesbian woman? And as Grant said, queer used to be something I didn't identify with actually, and I'm coming to terms with. So, you know, being called that too has a different way that I look at it, depending on the context actually. So, you know, intersectionality for me means all of the things. I'm all of those things all the time. I am not divided. So it's interesting that somebody started with saying that, you know, it was a transgender woman at the forefront of Pride. Yet I don't think many know that, even with the internet being out there. And that's for me why I still feel I'm at the margins of the margins. The mere fact that we have so much information at the touch of our fingertips, I still feel like when I look around in a room, I don't see me. And I was saying that in terms of a bigger focus, because I'm in education, I still don't see me. And that's an issue. That's a real big issue for me, because for the youth like Hannah that welcomed me here and Leo and Enrique, you know, they need to see themselves. They are not the margins. And so that's what intersectionality means at this very moment for me. We need to get beyond there, Victoria. We need to be centered in everything.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I wanted to ask William, we haven't heard from you yet. I want to talk about your intersectionality. If you're intersectional, in what ways and how does it affect you?
Wow, that's a big question. It's something I've been sort of coming to terms with over the last year or so, realizing that I don't fit in one box, if you will. You know, I'm a gay man, but I'm also Latino. I'm also Scottish. I'm also, you know, all of these things that make me who I am. sort of, they intersect and they affect every part of my life. They affect my work as a singer and a musician, the kinds of music that I can sing or cannot sing, the kinds of people is socially acceptable for me to associate myself with based on my family. And so there's all of these things that affect my life, and all of these things are who I am. And I never realized how much intersectionality affected my life until COVID started, and I took a step back and I looked at everything that had happened in my life. I thought, wow, I'm not just a skinny white boy from, a small town in Ontario. I'm also, a fierce, Latino whose mother came here when she was 7 years old, with nothing. I'm a strong immigrant, although I was born here, so there's that fiery Latin spirit within me. And that's, that's also right next to my whiteness and my, my Scottish folk songs. They're all they're all there. And it's funny to think about how it affects me in my work, because I'm very passionate about amplifying the voices of marginalized communities within the world of music, composers, poets, etc. And when I speak about these things to my classmates and colleagues and things, they say, oh, well, what would you have to say about that? Who are you to talk about these things? Because I look like a white person, I don't look like, my family worked on farms, I don't look like what people think I am. And people say, oh, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to sing that, you're not allowed to wear that, because you look a certain way or you act a certain way, and it totally affects everything I do. I'm rambling a bit, so I'll end it here, but yeah, it's very complicated.
Thanks, William. And what you said about, small town and forgetting your roots a bit, or maybe not wanting to claim it in fears of not being accepted, which just does show the power of your intersectionality, right? That is what it means, and that is the power of it. And I wanted to jump to Roslyn. I want to have you talk about the intersectionality and how does it affect you?
So when I think about this, and I've been thinking about this for a few days and watching a couple things that have kind of caught my eye, and I think when we really think about intersectionality, we go all the way back to colonialism. We look at how society was created at that period of time, where you had, the hires, the kings, the wealthy people, and then you had, some people under them, and then you had those people who were so poor that might be working in their mines and stuff. And then somewhere along the lines, they needed to create an other who were below those people who were working in the mines. So now we're going to start grabbing and we're going to start bringing in slaves and we're going to start enslaving people. And then, we go on to America and sort of spread across. In the sort of present day context, I look at it as like how it affects me. So I'm a woman. I'm a single mom. I have multiple ability challenges, from a transsexual background. I'm a lesbian, so there is sort of multiple intersecting connectors that I think the one thing that I'm fortunate about is I'm working and I'm educated. So I have those two things to sort of keep me, a little bit above ground. But the way it's sort of the way that society or societal structures impact a person, and so it sort of comes at me from multiple different directions. For the people I work with, so it absolutely, something we look at all the time is how things are intersecting with and impacting on that person we're working with. So they may be fleeing abuse. They also may be, a parent. They may have been sponsored to come to Canada. They, so they may not have money. They may not have shelter at a certain point. So it's all about intersecting. And I don't think there is a person out there who has just sort of, or maybe some very wealthy person who has just one sort of circle with nothing else intersecting it and crossing through it and impacting it. So I look at it as how things impact us through societal structures. And I could ramble on, but I think I'll stop there.
Thanks, Rosalind. Every time that I ask you a question, I feel like I've just been hit with so much knowledge. But it is true that there are so many nuances within the intersectionality, right? And that maybe people who have a similar identity, if they don't have a certain education, right? They can't, I want to say they can't advocate for themselves in the same way as other people who may have a similar identity, and maybe they have a bachelor's degree. Maybe they have something that gives them the background, maybe the education, like Leah was talking about, saying, I know who I am, I know my identity, but if you don't have the education, right, it's hard to really advocate for yourself and say, I know my rights, right? Because what can you know when people have hid the information and they're not allowing you to know about yourself, right? And I want to talk to Hannah about the same question, just about that last piece of intersectionality. So Hannah, what do you have to say about intersectionality?
Well, what I was going to say is that about intersectionality is that I went and picked up the definition, but I don't think that I feel I need to read it. I think what Rosalind said was so beautiful, and I think that it sums it up really well. For me, being in the ways that I'm intersectional is that I'm half Black and I'm queer and I'm a woman, and those things intersect and affect me in a certain way. And I'm completely aware of every privilege I have of having education, that I'm not an immigrant, that I was born in Canada, that even I said that I'm half Black, but my complexion, I don't present as Black. So I don't have to deal with a lot of the things that a lot of people who do present as Black do have to deal with, like just walking down the street, minding their own business isn't a problem for me, but it's a problem for other people who may have a darker complexion than I am. And then, yeah, I'm a woman, but I'm a cisgender woman. So I have the privilege of not having people, poke my business and bother me about what's in my pants, and other things that affect trans women. But I think that the disadvantages that come with my identity, and I talk about it a lot because I have a lot of personal experience with it, is objectification and sexualization. Being a young Black queer woman is something else, and you are just an object for people to look at. And then especially if you're mixed or have more Eurocentric features as a Black person, you're then looked at as exotic, and that's not a compliment. People think that it is, but it's not a compliment. And then I have often guys who will be like, oh, well, I like girls who like girls, and that's hot. And it's like, I don't like women for you. I like women because I like women. I feel like I've said it a million times, and I'm going to keep saying it until they leave me alone, but I like women because I like women. And I think just being a woman in general is just a whole just stew of unwanted sexualization of yourself. And then there's, I find, also I noticed, especially in high school, in my social circles, is that you get these little things that now I know are called microaggressions. I didn't know that word when I was in high school, but now I know what those are. And it was interesting for me to reflect on that when I was thinking about this question of like, that's really interesting how my friends who recognized me as a Black person would say things to me like, oh, you're so scary when you're angry, Hannah. Am I scary, or do I just know how to assert boundaries properly? It's just, that's more leading into my identity as a young Black person and how people don't like to see us be assertive or say that, hey, you can't do that to me. And then on the flip side of that, being super openly gay in high school, you have girls who I did not dare tell anybody in my gym class that I was gay, because then I didn't want to have to like go change in the bathroom by myself and like be treated as an other, because I'm not predatory. I'm just changing for my next class. Like I'm like, and things like, oh, don't have a crush on me. It's very like, it's, I want to use a more intellectual word, but it's icky is the best way I can sum it up. Is it doesn't feel great to be, it doesn't feel good to have all these things pointed at you, and you're just so you're somehow both the center of attention and completely invisible at the exact same time. It's the craziest thing, because you're the different one, but because you're the different one, you have no voice in certain situations. And it's a really, really weird tightrope walk for that, in my experience. And then, like, I believe William was saying, like Vanessa was saying, is that margins of the margins, or that identity crisis of where do I sit if I'm Black, but I don't present as Black, and I'm gay, but I also like men. So if I'm in a relationship with a man, suddenly that diminishes the fact that I'm gay to certain people, and that it's all very complicated, and and like I said before, some of the treatment is very icky, for lack of a better word.
Wow. Thanks, Hannah. I have to remember your quote. Am I scary, or do I just know how to assert my boundaries? I'm saving that for later for myself, honestly, because people tell me the same thing, right? You know, you get that label, like you're this aggressive Black woman. And yeah, I totally agree with you that in my younger, like elementary or high school, even university experiences, I think a lot of people were like, oh, you know, she's not a pushover, right? But that doesn't mean that I'm scary. It just means that I'm comfortable knowing that this is the line for me, right? And a lot of people don't want to hear that specifically from Black women. They really feel offended for some crazy reason. They feel offended when you assert the boundary, right? And it can go back to colonialism. It can go back to the over-sexualization and feeling that you should be grateful for attention, right? And then people feel like you've tarnished their identity when you say, no, actually, I don't want to speak to you, right? And the microaggressions is also a great point, even within biracial communities. There's so many microaggressions, right? It happens all the time. And people will say things to you knowing that you're Black, and they will still say it to your face, which it's hard, right? Being a young girl. And I think also the last point you had there was kind of the bi erasure, in a way where, you know, you can say, I like a lot of people. I like men, I like women, I like non-binary individuals, and people say you can't choose. You don't really know where you are. It's just your stepping stone to saying that you're gay. And there's so many things that people are just telling you to run into the box, and you don't want to be in the box, right? You're allowed to love whoever you love or like whoever you like. I want to talk about the progress that we've seen within our community and what progress still needs to be made in order for us to move forward as a community, playing into gender roles, beauty standards, privilege, BIPOC voices, and children. So I want to ask Leo, for your opinion first about the progress within our community, and then what progress still needs to be made.
So, like I said, like I said earlier, I've lived through, like, even in my short amount of time, I think I've lived through a lot of progress, like seeing the community evolve. And I'm trans, and like the discourse around transness has just evolved so rapidly, and it's constantly reinventing itself. So yeah, the community has evolved in made very significant strides in even my very short life so far. Um, but I think something that really has started to bother me as a fault, and something that's very relevant today, is the beauty standards of the LGBTQ community, and the invisibility of anyone like over 40. Like like queerness LGBTQ identity does not stop once you start aging. And it's almost fascinating in a morbid kind of way, the way we have slathered foundation and contoured the face of LGBTQ to the point where we kind of disregard anything that anyone or any viewpoint that isn't conventionally attractive. Like I love Laverne Cox and all of the trans icons that have come out recently, but I'm so aware that there are trans people who are well over 40 or 50 or even 60 who deserve to have their experiences shared just as widely. I don't think we can safely and sincerely call ourselves a community if we don't start listening to each other to the degree that we deserve as a community full of experiences and with voices and diversity. I truly hope that in my lifetime I see this change, because I think it's a true shortcoming. I don't want to live my entire youth thinking that nobody is going to listen to me as soon as I start aging.
Wow, that was powerful, Leo. And you brought up a great point that you are able to see the perspectives within the age of your generation or older generations. And I want to speak to Jeannie, and I want to ask, do you feel like, you were nodding along, and do you feel like what Leo was saying was resonating with you in a way? And what progress do you think still needs to be made?
Yeah, I was just like, yeah, exactly. Like exactly that. I think it's in the larger population, but is disproportionate within our community. Because I think the same thing happens on the gay male side that happens on the female or female embodied side. I think it boils down to, at the end of the day, hardcore misogyny that tries to direct what we need to look like, that gives a standard of unattainable beauty. And we get to be the donkey that chases the carrot for the rest of our lives, obsessed by that, sometimes to our detriment, physically, psychically, emotionally, spiritually. And yeah, we're a youth-driven society. And one of the reasons that we're doing this is because there is a disconnect between our youth and our seniors, that I think is a side effect, if not purposeful, to keep us divided. Because if you look at any marginalized people, when you remove the cohesiveness of generations, when you remove the grandfather, mother, child bond, and then you lose a lot of power, you lose your history, you lose your strength, and then we stay disenfranchised, and the lessons of the past are not learned, only to be repeated by the young again, which does not need to happen. So yeah, the truth of the matter is by the time you come into your 40s and your 50s and your 60s, you're in your power. It's taken a long time to find it. And all of the juice that you've used to get here, all of those tribulations and figuring out about yourself and accepting these pieces and all of that work, then gets lost if it's not shared to the rest of the community again, right? So I think it's essential that that cycle be broken and that we collectively do not buy into that at all. We need to feel good about us, who we are. If I feel fabulous and I'm breaking out the fake pearls, that's great. But if I'm not, I'm not, you know what I mean? And that's okay. And we need to all we just need to be good with that, I think. Yeah.
Thanks, Jeannie. And yeah, the continued oppression of the male gaze, it's really powerful because yeah, it does disenfranchise the community, right? Then people start to judge within, and that's where their division comes from. Absolutely. I wanted to speak with Henrique and ask about what progress have you seen within our community?
Wow. It's, honestly, it gets very hard to talk after listening to Leo and Jenny because it was so amazing. Thank you for sharing your words. But the progress that I can see, it's definitely the coming out of the younger generation. I think it is so inspiring to see how they are braver and they just accept easier, in a easier way, who they are without the need of I want to say without the need of acceptance, because it's not a fight anymore of like, I'm here and I exist. It's just like, I am here, period. And you can either deal with that or not, but I am still here. So what's the point of trying to just argue with that? It's just like, I think that there's this sort of innocence, I think, that is just like, I don't know what's the big deal. So why you keep doing that? And it's overpopulating the whole world of like, well, this is us and we're just here and we're doing our thing and just deal with that. That's a huge progress that I've been witnessing. And I believe that the progress that still has to be made is this coming out situation. I think that it was mentioned in a few panels ago, of the need of not having a coming out situation for anybody. Why do we need to come out and be like, hey, so y'all, this is who I am? Why do we need to, introduce ourselves in a certain way? Why do we need to just label ourselves within the community when actually it is a spectrum? Today I feel this way, tomorrow I might feel differently, and it is just this. It's not like, hey, I'm Henrique, I'm cisgender man and I'm gay. I'm Henrique, period. And whatever I am tomorrow, I am still Henrique, And I think that this new generation and this community is getting stronger at creating this new world of no more labels, just names, and whatever name you choose to have as well, so yeah.
Thanks, Henrique. That is a pretty strong progress that we have seen, right? We did talk about last week, we did talk about how the coming out for the younger generation seems to be, again, not easier for everyone, right? This is we could say our experience as Canadians, as immigrants of Canada. Other places in the world, it's not the same as this, right? We do recognize and understand that. But I have seen, personally, I currently live in Vietnam, and I see my students, right? Gay marriage is not legal in Vietnam, but my students are openly gay. A lot of them are, just because they follow social media. They're online and they're like, oh, this is cool. Everyone can be who they are. We don't have to hide, right? And it doesn't mean that what their families 100% accept them, but they do know at least that at school they can be accepted because everyone is kind of with the times, you could say, as a younger generation. Everything they write about is, oh, can I write about LGBT? Everything they want to write is about that. And I find that interesting because, yeah, like I said, it's a country where gay marriage is not legal, right? They don't recognize that. But yet, the younger generation feels empowered for some progress you think still needs to be made for us to move forward.
Yeah, I mean, with these voices here, I kind of wanted to just defer back to them. But I think for me, I think the visibility. I think there is a level of visibility now. We always think urban, but they're in my community, and who are they? I put the quotes around. So tolerance. I want to say, and I want to swing this and pivot in another way. Being a Black queer woman, I think one thing I need to mention is that systemic oppression does mean white supremacy. Also, I'm going to put those words out there. And when white supremacy doesn't mean you have to be the skin color of white. It is a system that we live in. It's a system we live by, and some of us not malicious. And I want to say that we need to improve that, everyone. Jeannie said that about the present and the past and the future, all interwoven. Maybe I should have switched that around, but so is everything else interwoven. And I think we need to realize that not all lesbians, I'm going to say for myself, have the same privilege. Absolutely not. And we don't all sit at the same table with the same amount of privilege. And that's something I want to see improved. Absolutely. And I know that Leo said in your time, listen, in my time, Leo, it better start to be improved because we need to rein down a little bit of some stuff if that does not happen. Another thing that I just want to know that we honor one another. Like, we need to be able to lean on one another, regardless of where we are. That's the point of this. And again, I want to shout out to Hannah because that is the point of the communities within the communities. We need to recognize we have to have dignity for one another. So that's what I want to see as I get older.
Absolutely, Vanessa. And like you said with the white supremacy, white supremacy doesn't need white people in order to uphold it, right? Sometimes we're complicit and we uphold systems that we shouldn't be, right? And looking at, like we said before with the male gaze, if we're judging from within, then we're upholding the standard, right? We're upholding the same systems that oppress us. And so that's how we can start to dismantle those systems within our communities. And I wanted to go to William and to talk about how can we support each other within the community? What ways can queer adults work with youth to continue to build diversity and acceptance within our own communities? And what can the youth advocate for to help the older generation?
Well, I'm not going to claim to have all the answers. That's for sure. I definitely don't. But I can say that the biggest changes in my lifetime, and I'm sure in many of yours, have been in school. Educational systems that support our young LGBT community as well as the older. I think education is the biggest thing for me because I didn't learn about the LGBT community in Catholic school. Definitely didn't do that. I didn't learn it in high school from my teachers. I learned it from the people down the hall calling me faggot. I'm like, I didn't even know what that was. By word of mouth. We learn by reading and watching and listening through our environment. And our environment has to reflect the values of the people. And that, for me, stems down to education. We need to be educating our youth on what it means to be LGBT and how we can support each other. And even if, for whatever reason, there's always that, and that's their opinion, and that is so valid, but that doesn't mean that they can take our pride away from us just because they don't agree with it. Does that make sense? So our feelings, our experiences are still valid, even though other people can't accept them. So that is the biggest thing. How can we support the older generation? Listening to them. Holy crap, do they know so much that we don't know as the young people? You know, how many times have any of you called your mother asking, how do I cook rice? How do how do how do you know when the potatoes are ready? You know, Mom, I don't know when the salmon's going to be ready. Can you know, like, how do you, iron a shirt without burning it? You call the your grandparents, your parents, your older sibling, your neighbor. You're not asking your 4-year-old niece how to iron a t-shirt, you know? So for me, how can we support the older generation? Listening, asking all the questions. How did you get to where you are now? What are things that changed your life when you were growing up? Because sooner or later, we're all going to be 6 feet under, and we're going to miss all that valuable information about how best to live our lives. And if we don't care to ask, it's gone. So there, period.
But Jeannie had said a couple questions ago that we need to learn from each other because we know what's going on. People who are in the older generation have already been through what we're going through, right? And so that is the experience that we need, and that does keep the community together. I wanted to ask Rosalind, what ways can the youth help advocate for older generations? And I know that you had, you were also laughing along when he was saying that we call our moms, right?
Been there, done that. We don't do what we should be doing. We shouldn't, you look at indigenous cultures, it was a whole sort of the elder, et cetera, all the way down. And there was that connection that constantly happened. This is where history is, and this is how history is shared. And this is how lessons are all learned. Having different, have these conversations, because conversations are important. A friend of mine, I'll call her a friend instead of past student of mine, began a project in Toronto called the Youth Elders Project, and it's actually still going on. So this started in 2017, and it still is going on, and it is bringing together youth and the older community to have conversations, to share what it was like, to hear what it is like, and to continue building together those bridges. Without it, things are lost. We don't know. Like repeating the same thing over again that somebody else did makes no sense. I think in the last panel we had that question about what would you tell your younger you that now. Well, that's sort of the same thing, right? It is sharing information that that they don't know, and hearing some of the struggles that they're having now, and coming together, and maybe together you find a way through those struggles. But it is important that we don't do this siloing thing where we're older, we know better, blah, 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 and not listening. And we're younger. What do you know? You're older. You know nothing. Because I had that with my kid growing up, right? We know enough to do that, because otherwise, what's the point?
Absolutely, Rosalind. And like you said, this is one of those opportunities. This panel is one of those opportunities to share and to learn, right? And so I want to ask Grant, what are some ways that you think we can support each other within the community?
I don't know what's left to be said. I mean, I wrote a very, very brief, clear, and concise response to the question, and now I just put between the young and the old farts, and I'll speak to myself. We want to listen and actually hear what we're saying. acknowledge and respect the differences, acknowledge and respect the good work that we have done separate of each other, acknowledge and respect the great work we've done together as a community, which let's leave the age out of there. Let's celebrate anyone and everyone who can truly affect change that makes the world a better place. I know that sounds a little bit corny, but you know, we could talk about it, you know, to what Roz just said. You know, I don't have any children, but how many times have I had the children of my friends and colleagues just look at us and just shake their head? And I just think, you know what, I didn't get to be 65 without learning a couple of things. So, but I think I'd like to close on that doesn't mean it should be ignored.
Mhm. Absolutely. And it's continuing that same sentiment that we all have something valuable to share and to share it while we can, right? And Vanessa, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I said, you know, I'm going to restate it. I think that we're all interwoven in some way. And I think that we need to have dignity and compassion with one another. I think that's something that we miss LGBTQ people out. And I don't mean Grant. Grant is a young person. I mean people who are far beyond Grant at certain times to tell us stories. That's not what we need. We need them part of our stories. They are our stories. And that's how I feel with the youth, because I feel I am in the sandwich right now. And that's my, it's not a burden, it's a privilege to the utopic hope. It's happening right now. There's this project I'm going to leave you with. It's happening right now at U of T, and it's a multi-generational project where they have first-year students who live with older people who've retired, who don't need a whole house or so forth. And, you know, they share the duties of the house and they become friends now. That's what we need to do. It's a really easy thing. So yeah, that's what I want.
Wow, and that may be not a full solution, but as we were talking about last week with care facilities and maybe just a place to be, would that be a solution in any sense, right? Where you have generations coming together, and the research shows, I know what you're talking about, Vanessa, the research shows that it actually works out really well. And those households are thriving. They are thriving. And Henrique, I wanted to end the question with you. How can we support each other, and how can youth help advocate to help the older generation?
I think it was mentioned before, but listening to each other, I think it is the biggest tool, and at the same time the biggest challenge, because people just want to speak and talk and be loud and speak louder instead of just listening. I think that once we listen and share knowledge and share experiences, we all learn and evolve together. It's not my generation is evolving, your generation is evolving. It's like everybody within the community, and the community is evolving. And we reflect that in the whole world, because, you know, we are so unique. We're so, let's call it what it is. We're so awesome and colorful and incredible that this reflects in the entire world. We came here to make a better world being who we are. But for that to happen, we need to, first of all, understand and acknowledge and listen that we are this uniqueness, that we are this special, brave, golden people that we are. So we just need to listen and have our hearts open to these changes that are happening in the world.
Thanks, Henrique. And I want to ask, think about what we've learned from this panel. I know that people on the panel have had their own separate panels, but this is bridging the gap, right? And so what have we learned from this panel? I want to talk to Jeannie.
All right, yeah. You know, for me, this panel has really reconfirmed the importance of inclusion being an active verb, not a passive thing. So, you know, in other words, inclusion with your back into it. So it's beyond tokenism. It's beyond the word came up earlier, tolerance, right? I don't think that our goal is to be tolerated, you know, as a unique group of people. So our strategic goals at the Center at the Jersey Center for Arts and Culture have been to drive inclusion and diversity through arts and culture in the community. I want to just quickly segue by saying also that it is a fact that the arts are overrepresented in the LGBTQ community. Like, we are everywhere in every single field of the creative arts, and we are fabulous. So whatever that is what that is. The stats speak for themselves, you know. So for me, it's just kind of, I think for Grant and I to go back and make a point of ensuring that youth voices and the presence are included in not a token way, but in all levels of the agency. So in terms of a board voice, in terms of you know, volunteer opportunities, in terms of accessing the gallery, becoming a part of the events, and consciously removing barriers and obstacles to that inclusion, because queer youth face certain obstacles that cis or straight peers do not. So access to a decent part-time job, you know, if you're a passing person and you can get the job at No Frills, that's awesome. But if you're not and you don't get that job, or you know, there's, like, again, going back to that intersectional place, there's a reason that opportunities present and don't present. So I think for us, just making sure that we recognize that the queer youth in Georgina do come from a hyper marginalized place, and that we will actively seek to remove any barriers from bringing these incredibly energetic, vibrant, passionate, and like these voices. I'm just like stunned right now. To be, what I've learned is I'm stunned right now, you know, at what I'm hearing. So that's really my recommitment in terms of making sure that we do what we got to do to be the best organization that we can be for arts and culture, and making sure that everybody's at the table that wants to be at the table.
Amazing, Jeannie. Thank you. And Grant, I wanted to ask if you had anything to echo that Jeannie was just saying.
Gosh, I wish people would stop speaking more articulate than I do. I mean, Jeannie, thank you. You know, it's crazy. People call me a leader, and as the executive director, I am in a leadership role. And there's some days I just wake up and say, oh my gosh, I'm just too old and too tired to do this. Let someone younger come in and you know, build on my voice. And when I thought about, you know, did I learn something from the panel? Was that my expectation? I think what I really wanted to, my takeaway was to have a better understanding of the conversations that, for a myriad of reasons, I was not part of. I really needed to understand what that looked like for me moving forward. But what I am walking away very, very excited about is that the conversation that is taking place now, whether I'm involved or not, is one that's providing more seats at the table, demonstrating inclusivity like I have never seen in my 65 years. Thank you, Vanessa. I'm a young 65. And youth, whether I agree with much of what I've heard, any of what I've heard, that's not the point. The point for me is there are an amazing number of youth out there who are prepared to stand by their convictions and not stop speaking until they're heard.
Amazing, Grant. And I want to go to one of those youth right now, Leo. I'd love to hear more from you about what you've learned on this panel.
Yeah, just try and stop me speaking, Grant. I'm gonna get a little personal here. I think I have always known that we have to listen to everyone, but I don't think I've ever practiced listening and giving everyone the effort they deserve. Like I can't count how many times in the same breath I have said, everyone deserves a chance to be educated or to be listened to. And then I say in the next breath, like, he or she or they are too old to grasp this concept. They're past it, they're not going to change. But everyone deserves effort until proven otherwise. Like I'm a little ashamed of myself, but I'm so proud to be in this moment where I realize meeting all of these wonderful people that I'm so privileged to meet here in this panel that, yeah, everyone does. They deserve a chance. And maybe maybe everyone's not as much of a lost cause as I might have been led to believe by a world that has made me very, very tired. I just want to say I love everyone here. Thank you all so much for giving me your time, giving everyone your time. I'm just gonna stop before I start crying because that'd be really awkward.
No, by all means, Leo, this is the place where you're connecting, and we really appreciate everything you've added to this panel. I've personally learned so much just from hearing you speak and hearing your specific perspective. Truly, it's meant a lot to me, and I'm probably speaking for a lot of people who are listening to you as well. So thank you a lot. And I want to ask Hannah, what have you learned from this panel?
So I think it's taking more of a minute to gather my thoughts because I'm looking at it from both the perspective of someone who's a panelist just participating in this event, and then also as the person who I made this, and I love what I've made, and it's only made me want to spread it wider and allow more, because Hannah Mullings Tatum, can only speak for what I represent, which is young, queer, half Black women. And there are certain voices that I can't speak for, and I will not speak for, but I will not just put a seat at the table that already exists, but build a whole new table that can fit everybody at it. Because I think that's a phrase I think that we use a lot, which is seats at the table. And I think that table was created for a very specific group of people. And ultimately there's not enough room at that table for everybody. So I think we should just make a bigger table. And I think that's probably my takeaway is that everything from this point on that I do will be dedicated to building that new table, whether it's metaphorically buying the wood for the table and the paint for the table and whatever, and it will be beautiful and inclusive and have enough elbow room for everybody. And I also, I also think that I'm glad that Leo started to bring it up a bit, because I know that in my edgy, angsty youth years as a teenager, as they start to come to a close, I've had that sort of like abrasiveness towards parental figures and authority figures and things like that, just out of habit of youth. And I think as I start to leave my teenage years, that starts to close. And I think that this panel helps a lot with that, of just really sitting and listening to people that have lived the things that I only read about on the internet. And I think that that's really cool. Yeah. So thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. And you know that table you're talking about, it seems like a dream, but at the same time, what you're doing now, you're building the legs of that table. You're already putting it together right now. And I feel like you are going to create that table, right? Because you're putting in the work. So I no, really, and I really, I'm excited to see it from you in the future. And Rosalind, I'd like to ask what you've learned from this panel.
Okay, got lost there for a second just listening. So it's interesting because, well, part of it is like, hey, I'd like to have a lot of you people out here. So I've been fortunate that I get to work with recently, and especially now that we're back in the office, there's actually young staff that are from the community. So I've been actually being able to recently listening more to their perspective, which is what I'm also hearing here. And I think this panel gives me a little bit more insight to where some of my new colleagues are coming from, and may help me bridge that gap communication and have those discussions. And I think be less fearful to have those discussions, because I think it's one thing at a distance, we're all talking on screen and saying things, and it's not going to impact you. You're not working with me, so it's not going to impact my work and my day-to-day working with relationship with somebody. But knowing that things that you say can impact a working relationship, I think this panel helps me to remember that, yes, I can do that. It does also remind me that although I'm missing camp, I'm wearing my camp t-shirt today in sort of some sort of solidarity, because for me, youth re-energize me. So I've got to sort of see and get some of that re-energization back from some youth that are here. And also solidarity with some non-youth that are here that I don't get to see, one in particular. So yeah, no, for me, this is just a day where I get to come and hang out, and with likeness and understanding, and knowing that throughout this COVID mess, we're not all alone. We are out there, and we do want things to change and get better. And I think we're just all looking for ways to do that. That's my rambling bit of today.
Thanks, Rosalind. And I can say again that I personally learned so much just from hearing you on this panel and also last week's panel. And I'm sure that other people feel the same way. And I'd like to ask Henrique, what have you learned from this panel?
Oh boy, that's gonna be hard. There's been so much, and I think that the first image that comes to my mind, learning and hearing everybody, is almost like that's all how it started. We all were in the hustle, so it's sort of, I feel like I'm grabbing the torch and I'm gonna start running for them, and I'm gonna keep running until the moment that I need to pass this on to someone else, to the next generation. And I think it is such an important cause that is just like visibility, or value of life, value of history, of our identity, having the honor to see how it all started, and who started and why, and they were not afraid of fighting for us, and that is reflecting on who we are right now. That is reflecting what we are gonna what we're gonna take from them and pass it on. It's not a war between generations. That's what I love the most. It's just not, oh, you know, it's the young generation against the older generations. Actually, both generations against a system that it's not good, a system that needs to change, a system that does not work for everybody. And they start to fight and they start to argue against that. And they trust in us to keep fighting for them and for us and for the future generation as well, especially for those who we know they do not have the voice, they don't have the space, they don't have the seat on the table, they don't have the table, they don't have the invite, they don't have not even the privilege to be invited, to be acknowledged. So it's on us to grab this torch and just keep fighting. And I think that the biggest lesson is just to know that it was never a war, as we used to think that. I think that we were all like, oh, you know, they're too old to understand what we're trying to talk about. And they were like, okay, they're too young to understand what we've been through. Where actually we sat down on the same table and we started to talk about it. So in the moment that we just listened, we were just like, oh, wait a second, we do have so much in common. Oh my God, why did we think we didn't? Why would we think that? So I think that what I learned is that history is being created. It started with them, it's going with us, and it's gonna go with everybody else in our future. So yeah.
Wow. Really, thank you, Henrique. Thank you. That was really powerful. And you know, your analogy of grabbing the torch and running with it until you have to pass it on, that really, really hit me. You know, I actually felt that. I really did. Just us running and fighting until you really have to pass it on, and learning and sharing from each other, right? That's absolutely what it is. I really love that. Thank you. I'd like to go to Vanessa and ask what you've learned from this panel.
Victoria, why do you always end up last with me?
I really don't know. I don't know if it's like, what am I doing? I don't know.
I want to say I feel really honored to listen to everybody here. I want to start with that. I'm humbled. I want to say the panel has given me soul food. And when I say soul food coming from the Caribbean, I mean the real good stuff. Like you just sit back and you take that in. You take that in. And I want to say not very much more. I say that, you know, the liberation one is the liberation of all. And Hannah, we're here to break that table. We're not building a new table. We're building what we need to build. We don't need a table. You tell us what we need to build. This is a community. So I'm going to end with, again, that, you know, when we see Pride and we see the hearts and we see the rainbows and we see all the other variations that have come to be, I think that's what it is. It's liberation. We're fighting for liberation. And every step of the way, Enrique, we will fight together, right? We lean on each other and we build together. That's where we are. So yeah, thank you for giving me the soul food, everybody.
That's amazing, Vanessa. Thank you so much. And I want to open it to anyone who would like to answer. You know, it's still June and this is Pride Month, right? And so what is the meaning of Pride Month for you? Anyone can jump in if you'd like to have a last remark about that. Hannah?
Yeah, I'd be free to start because I think I've told this story a couple times that pretty much sums up everything that Pride is to me. But I think that this story is extra emotional because for today, because two of the people that I looked up to very much at the time of this story are actually in the room. So that's pretty cool for them to hear how much that this meant to me. So when I talk about what Pride means to me and what Pride Month, or what being LGBTQ means to me, is I always talk about the second Tuesday of high school, because I was sitting in sitting in my homeroom, just waiting for announcements to be over. And I heard
Hannah, are you still there? Okay, so I think that Hannah is having some difficulties. Okay, so I'd love to open it up until she's able to tell us her story for people who can tell us what's the meaning of Pride Month for you, if anyone would like to jump in. William, yeah.
Just want to say, I don't know how I can formulate sentences after hearing everybody else's inspirational thoughts and feelings about this community. So I don't know how much I can add, but I can say that Pride Month for me is a moment to stop and smell the roses. Because throughout the year, throughout our lives, we get caught up in the hustle and bustle of trying to make the world a better place, that we forget to actually stop and look at how beautiful it is. And for me, that is Pride Month. And every year I look forward to it because I get to look at what my colleagues have accomplished and what I've accomplished over the year and say, wow, aren't we lucky? Aren't each and every one of us so blessed to be here? You know, we've fought and we've done everything we can to get where we are. And we forget to be grateful that we were even given the opportunity to fight in the first place. And we forget to thank those who have fought before us. You know, and for a lot of people, the young generation, Pride Month is, you know, walking around Bloor Street naked and, you know, I don't know, drinking a beer out of somebody's hat or whatever. You know, like, to me, the partying isn't worth it if you don't stop and acknowledge why we're celebrating. So yeah, for me, Pride Month is acknowledging our accomplishments, being grateful, and you know, praising Jesus that we're able to do this, because it is a gift to be able to celebrate yourself and your community.
Thanks, William. I really like your analogy of stopping to smell the roses, right? If that's what Pride Month means to you, I think that's really beautiful, just to appreciate where we've come, right? I'd love to pass it back to Hannah if you're able to. And
yeah, certainly.
amazing.
Certainly. That was, yeah, love internet troubles. And what I was going to say is that the story that I tell is I go back to the first Tuesday of my high school when I was in at my high school over in Newmarket, and I was sitting in my class. I was sitting in my homeroom, waiting for announcements to finish, and there was a little one that was about our high school's GSA. I didn't really know what a GSA was supposed to look like because in the town that I grew up in, that was something that we certainly did not have. But I knew that I wanted to, I knew that I had to go. I had to go. I had to see it. I had to know what it would be. So then after my last class, I went and I stood outside of the staff room in my high school, my little Harry Potter backpack, a little dorky kid, just waiting to see who would show up. And it was so amazing to see the people who did show up and how interesting it was to look at every single one of us, because we were all the same in that we are all completely different from one another. And I thought that was so amazing, because there's this comfort in looking at and being around other people, other queer people as a queer youth, because it's like, even if you've never met them, it's like sitting amongst your old friends, because you're not the same as your old friends, but you know them and they're familiar to you without them even trying. And there was two people in particular that were part of this GSA, one of them in my first year of that GSA who led it, and then the following year who I co-led with, who are just who are in the room, who are just at that age were everything that I wanted to be as a queer person. I wanted to be so comfortable with myself and so have the poise and the leadership and the quiet but firm leadership that Leo had, and I wanted to have the poise and the elegance and the just amazingness that William had, and I loved it so much, and it was such a safe place for me to have at my school. And yeah, that it meant a lot to me, and they meant a lot to me, and everybody who was in that GSA meant a lot to me because of how themselves they were, even if it was just for that hour on every Tuesday. There's so much I didn't need to explain myself to anybody, and I think that that's very beautiful, and I think that that is pride to me.
Wow, thank you, Hannah. Thank you for sharing. And that is powerful, right? Because you're finding people almost as our panel last week, we were saying that, finding your group, finding people who you connect with. And sometimes that's just showing up, looking at each other and saying, okay, we're all here for the same purpose, a shared purpose. And that in itself brings you together. So that's really powerful. I'd like to ask if one more person would like to say, what is the meaning of Pride Month for you? Leo.
So, Hannah, how dare you do that to me? This is live. How dare you? I'd like to start off by saying, if I inspired this even a little bit, even a micro fraction, I can't explain how proud I am of you. And are you is another panelist really gonna make me cry on camera? Really? I would like to explain what pride means to me by another story that happened in high school. I had an argument in the hallway about Black rights with somebody who did not know what they were talking about. And my grandma picked me up later that day, and I was just so angry, and I explained to her like how hard it is to have like idiots who don't understand how much you're worth surround you, and how I was so proud to be a Black person. And she stopped me and she said, no, that's not, you got it all wrong. You got it backwards. You should never be proud to be Black, because being Black is easy. You were just born Black. Be proud to live Black. So, and I have carried that with me every day of my life ever since. Just, it is, I was born gay, I was born trans, I was born Black and white, and I was born as I am. I have never changed. I am very stubborn, but to live it has been hard. And this, I'm so happy to be here and tell you that I am happy and proud to be here, because I am surrounded by people who have struggled and who have succeeded in living as themselves. And that is nothing to scoff at. And it is everything to honor. So I am honored. Thank you for having me be here. And thank you to everyone for showing up.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you to all of the panelists, and thank you to Hannah once again for putting this together. It's such a needed series, and you know, I say the youth. I'm part of the youth. I will, I will admit, but I'm even astounded at the youth, the people who are younger than me, who are creating this event, right? And that just shows me how powerful the whole spectrum is of people who, it doesn't matter your age, like Henrique was saying before, we're just fighting together against systems, right? And I really want to thank everyone for being so present in these conversations, opening up, being vulnerable. Tears are okay. It's just an emotion. You know, it's part of your human experience. So in the spirit of Pride Month, we're learning together, and I hope that we've bridged the gap. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So just before I bring our event to its official close, I have two final acknowledgements to close this off. Firstly, we would like to send our love and light out to the Indigenous and Muslim communities in Canada. We stand with you, we fight with you, and we hold you within compassion within our hearts, and we understand. And secondly, let's breathe that one in. And then on another note, I have to show you all my shirt as a part of our partnership with Jericho Youth Services. This awesome tie-dye t-shirt is from a local youth with Jericho Youth Services that they made themselves, and it's so cool. And we got a message from them as well. So from Arik Nelson and Andrea Nelson, for their inspiration for their shirt, they said, I feel it's important for everyone to be equal and support each other. We have family and friends who are with the same sex partners, so we are supporting them and all those who love who they love. And they had a little message that they wanted to add on that also, which was, everyone deserves to be treated equally. You can't control who you love. Live your life being your best you. If you don't understand or agree, it's okay. They're not living your life. Life is short, so make the best of it by being yourself and being proud. And I think that's a beautiful message from Jericho Youth Services. And I'd like to tell you all about Jericho Youth Services summer camp. Jericho Youth Services Ultimate Experience Summer Camp is an amazing way for kids to spend their summer. Days are jam-packed with full of arts and crafts, science experience, physical activities, outdoor play, community building projects. Jericho will be operating camps both in Sutton and Keswick to serve all of Georgina. If you are interested in registering for camp, please go to their website at www.jerichoyouthservices.org. Thank you very much. And we'll be turning it over to Grant and Jeannie of Georgina Arts and Culture Center for final remarks.
Might help if I unmuted myself. Thank you very much. I'm going to make this very, very brief. And I think I'm just going to echo everybody's words. Thank you. Yeah, this has been a really interesting journey. I will speak for myself, and I think Jeannie would say the same thing. Everyone coming to the, here we go with that table again, Hannah. So we know it's getting bigger. But yeah, you know, the tears we've shed, you know, maybe some of the frustration we've felt, maybe there's still a couple of unanswered questions, but at the end of the day, and I think Leo, you said it beautifully, it's like we were all present. We came, we sat, we felt, we shared, we cried, we laughed. That's it for me.
Yeah, you know, this has been beautiful, like truly a beautiful experience. For me, I thank everyone so much for spending the time and connecting, and for allowing me to tap into that tribe that we talked about, because you can feel it when you're with your people. You can feel it when, regardless of the age, regardless of the differences, you can feel it on a visceral gut level that you are kind of connecting with that big old glittery queer mothership. And that's what this has felt like to me. So I thank you so much, you know, to the youth members. Thank you for ruining my makeup because it was perfect before I started crying. So thank you for that. And I'm just sending kisses. I'm just sending kisses.
Yeah, I just want to really quickly echo everything that has been said already. Thank you so much. On behalf of Jericho Youth Services, I am honored to be here with your vulnerability and with your emotion and celebrate Pride with you. So thank you so much for having us here.
I think everything has already been said, but thank you so much on behalf of Sandgate Women's Shelter of York Region for allowing me the space to come in and sit at this table. I think it's really important that we don't just have these conversations in June, but all year round, and they're so very important. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences, allowing me to sit in. And I have so much love and respect for all of you beautiful people. So thank you so much. And we stand in solidarity with you and we support you. So thank you so much, everyone.
And finally, I just like to say from the bottom of my heart, a very, very big thank you to everybody who has participated in these panels, who supported me and just everyone here. Thank you to our partnerships on behalf of both myself and my mom, Kendra Yoga Center, and on a personal note from me, this is an incredible thing, and it's so wonderful for me to watch this become what it is. And I'm so grateful, so grateful for everybody who's tuned in and everybody who's participating, and just thank you. And happy Pride.